Welcome, welcome. We will start in just a second as our LinkedIn live streaming starts. My name is Kim Igwe, and I am the Professional Learning Manager here at BranchEd. We are thrilled to have you here today. As we wait for our LinkedIn live stream to start, we would love to know who's joining us today. Please introduce yourself in the chat by sharing your name and institution, organization, or district. We also have a poll on the screen to learn more about your role and who is joining us. So if you can answer that poll as well, we would love to know who is in the room today. We are so thrilled to have you. I'm going to get us started. Branch Alliance for Educator Diversity, or BranchEd, is a professional services organization and a collective of university faculty and leaders advancing educational equity and excellence by expanding individual capacity, enabling supportive relationships, boosting institutional effectiveness, and collaborating with communities. BranchEd's commitment is to achieve sustainable, programmatic transformation, leading to improved outcomes for diverse educators who, by extension, benefit all students by preparing them to thrive in our heterogeneous society. BranchEd offers a variety of professional learning experiences and resources for individuals, institutions, and community members. Through each of these professional learning experiences, our beliefs hold true that every student deserves access to caring, adaptive, and well-prepared teachers, that every teacher deserves preparation that fuses quality with diversity, and that every person benefits when we create a higher standard of education together. A little bit on housekeeping today. We will be recording this webinar, and we will make it available in a follow-up email and also on our resource portal. As I mentioned, we're live streaming this webinar on LinkedIn. Welcome to all those who are joining on LinkedIn. Resources and links will be shared in the chat feature in Zoom. Please use the chat feature to notify our BranchEd team of any technical difficulties. Thank you, BranchEd team, for helping us. And you can submit any questions using the Q&A feature in the webinar. Today is the sixth webinar in our 2022-2023 webinar series. The purpose of this series is to highlight the application of BranchEd's signature framework for the quality preparation of educators, which outlines a roadmap to create teacher preparation programs that meet the needs of our increasingly diverse student body. It seeks to build equity-oriented educator preparation programs that prepare educators to reflect and respect the value of the diversity of America's PK through 12 school children. The framework identifies 6 critical principles that teacher preparation providers can leverage to redesign their programs. 2 of these principles, community of learners and data empowerment, provide the foundation for the remaining principles: equitable experiences, inclusive pedagogy, intersectional content, and practice-based approach. Today's webinar is focused on how an EPP purposefully engages candidates in direct experience of teaching and focused reflection in order to increase knowledge, develop skills, clarify values, and develop the capacity to contribute to diverse communities. Our speaker today is Dr. Allison Leggett, who is the director of UCLA Extension's Teacher Education Program, providing classes for new teacher credentialing, staff development programs for existing teachers, certificates in college counseling, early education training, and many specialty needs. For 35 years, Dr. Leggett has been a teacher administrator at local school districts, taught in a range of teacher education programs, supervised teacher credentialing programs, developed online learning courses for local K through 12 programs, and has held key committee assignments for the state and national commissions and peer reviewer of educational research. At her heart, Dr. Leggett is a teacher, having spent a lifetime encouraging and advancing the career of other educators through diverse, equitable, and inclusive practices. Thank you so much for being here. Before I hand it over to Dr. Leggett, we would love to know what brought you here today. In the chat, please share what you hope to get out of today's webinar. Now I'd love to hand it over to you, Dr. Leggett.
Thank you so much. It is so exciting to be able to share with the audience practice-based approach through the teacher induction program through teacher education at UCLA Extension. Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Allison Leggett, and I am the Director of Teacher Education at UCLA Extension. So a little bit about my background that was shared is that I really am a teacher at heart. And what that means is that I care about all individuals that I meet. I want to ensure that if they're interested in educating others, that they get the best foundation for doing so. That great foundation must be rooted in ensuring that the most vulnerable population, which are our students, get the care that they need. Yes, we understand that they do need the content, but they also need to know that you care. So what I do in my one-on-one meetings with my students in teacher education is I ask them, how do you approach your students? We all know that you will have the content and you will deliver the content, but the students will really be able to associate and really learn and embed that within themselves if they know that you care about delivering it to them. With practice-based learning, you really combine the theory. So what are the theoretical basis for which you're teaching? And the work experience. You may not have thought about that work experience. With strategic reflective process throughout the duration of the learning. So let's go back to understanding the theory and why do we mean theory-based? Well, you have multiple elements of theorists who will talk about the best way for students to learn. It could be a constructivist approach, for instance, where students are building upon their prior knowledge, or it could be work and experience-based learning. But either way, you want to ensure that you connect with them. UCLA Extension Induction Program, we think about the why. So we are working with educators who will need to undertake what the state requires for them in completing what's called a clear credential in California. So the why within our program is equity, diversity, and inclusion focus. There is quite a bit of work now associated with equity, diversity, and inclusion, but I think it's vital to understand what that means in a teacher education program. We definitely want to be open enrollment, and what that means is that we don't necessarily look at the grade point average. We don't necessarily look at how many years that the student has had the most positive in terms of feedback from their principals, but we do look for a sustained growth. So yes, we could choose students that have like 100% or all 4s or all 10s on their evaluations, or we could look at some that are showing growth. So that's where we look at establishing more of an equitable approach, seeking diverse populations of teacher educators, and to ensure that we want to make sure the populations that we work with are from inclusive parts of the community. So that would also include those in the LGBTQ community, as well as those from outside, even from outside that got their education outside of California and outside of the country. Our why also includes the ability to build a society. So more so than just what we do and work with teacher education, we understand how our teachers affect the most vulnerable populations of young kids. So we want to make sure that those kids learn from our teachers how we want to infuse building a bigger society in which individuals have equal access to resources and receive equitable treatment, regardless of race, gender, religion, sexuality, income level, or ability. So again, that's infused in our why. This is what we seek and what we want to ensure. And we want to make sure the 5 C's of the 21st century skills are embedded: communication, collaboration, critical thinking, and creativity. And without those 4 powerful C's, we wouldn't be able to be as successful as we are, because we understand that teachers really touch lives forever. So in our teacher education program, specifically for teacher induction, we believe in a continuum of teaching practices. This is a 2-year program, and we want to maintain expectations that are required from the state. And those expectations are under what's called the California Standards for the Teaching Profession, that are related to what's known as the TPEs, or the Teaching Performance Expectations. So as we look at the 6, these are across the board consistent with other programs, we're sure, around the nation, but we want to ensure that they are very meaningful for our students. CSTP1, engaging and supporting all students in learning. In my observations of teacher candidates, many times I see them maybe ignoring students in the back of the classroom who have their head down, or who might be second language learners that may not understand the language. They need to have time to decode. We have to stress the importance of making sure all of the students receive equitable access to what you're teaching, and to take time, if needed, to work individually with that student sitting at the back of the class. I remember recently I observed a class, and there was it was co-teaching model, and the more experienced teacher felt that she should explain to me, oh, he just speaks French and he'll catch up. And I said, that's not best practices. That does not engage all of the students. There needs to be time to engage that student, happened to be a little boy, with what he's learning. If you need to bring culturally relevant, because he was from France, I believe, culturally relevant materials, then you need to do that. If you need to bring in words that match in similar context and tone to the French language, then you do that. But letting him sit alone and kind of like hearing the words is not effective. In CSTP2, creating and maintaining effective environments for student learning, piggybacking on that one student who spoke French, we want to ensure that not just at one time that I was observing, but under all circumstances, that we maintain effective learning environment, so that if I were to poll each and every student in that class, I would find the same thing, that they were being effectively taught. For CSTP3, understanding and organizing subject matter for student learning, it's vital that students build up on their learning experiences. So organizing it where the students start off smaller and learning how to read and building up to whole words, I think is vital. Although some may teach it differently, they teach whole word phonetics, but we want to ensure that it's a buildup of skills. And CSTP4, planning instruction and designing learning experiences for all students, looking at the bigger picture, not just looking at that day's lesson plans or that week's lesson plans, but actually looking at weeks and weeks and weeks or units of lessons. Because without knowing what direction the students are going in and understanding what the end result would be, it's not going to be easy to plan the lesson. In CSTP5, assessing student learning, assessments. I teach an assessment class, and it is a challenge to train new teachers away, I would say, from the typical textbook version of assessments. Because if you've been in education for any period of time, you'll notice that many standardized educational or textbook related test systems are not culturally relevant. And that disputes any diversity, equity, and inclusion goals that we have. They're not culturally relevant. So I want to ensure that my students understand that, yes, they can use textbook type assessments as a base, but I want them to have the opportunity to write their own. And of course, in assessments, you have informal and formal assessments. You have formative and summative assessments. So I ensure that they have exposure and practice to working with all of those. And of course, to ensure that there's a reliability element, that what they've, the test that they give this year, let's say is for third grade, would also be relevant for the next year and the next year. So that reliability is there, and that they truly and honestly prove validity, content validities, especially that they are testing what they intended to test. And last, but certainly not least, CSTP 6, I share to ensure that students understand that they are a book. The students read them like they would read a book. So they must dress properly, they must talk appropriately, and most importantly, they must abide by the code of conduct in order to proceed. Because you don't want to train teachers to be necessarily buddies with the students. They are an authority figure. They are, most importantly, role models. So their behavior in working with parents and working with their colleagues is being seen by every student on that campus. So we want to make sure that they are aware of that, that CSTP 6, developing as a professional educator, is vital. So the overview of teacher induction, and let me make sure that teacher induction is clearly delineated. So in the state of California, our teachers become teacher candidates through a two-tiered process. The first tier is to obtain what we call preliminary teacher credential. So that preliminary teacher credential, big congratulations for those who obtain that. In order to have a clear credential, which is the next part, the teacher induction portion, they must, the teacher candidate must go through a teacher induction program. Sometimes they're done through a school district. It used to be called BTSA, BTSA, and then ultimately induction was used. We have local county offices that provide direction and induction training, but also universities such as UCLA Extension does the same. So these are educators that are called teacher candidates that are trying to get this, if you want to call it, permanent credential through the state of California. The permanent credential is good for a few years, like 5 years, and then they have to renew it. But at least it puts them at their school district on a permanent route. So our program at UCLA Extension is 100% teacher-centered. So we understand, for instance, in secondary education in the state of California, a teacher must have what's called a single subject teaching credential. Let's say if they were teaching science So single subject teaching credential in a specific science, such as chemistry, biological science, or physics, for instance. Or if they were teaching English language arts, it would be single subject teaching credential in English language arts. If the teacher was teaching in a self-contained classroom that was not special education, the credential would be called multiple subject credential. So obviously all topics are taught and they're for the lower grade levels. And then ed specialists are those that teach special education. So no matter what the subject is, whether it's single subject, multiple subject, or special education, we make sure that the course relates to them with proper instruction as well as the mentor. It is focused on the CSTPs, so 6 standards that I mentioned of California Standards for the Teaching Profession. There is a mentor and the candidate must have a collaboration. So we handpick a remarkable person who is a mentor teacher. And by the way, I also worked as a mentor teacher. The most fulfilling experience you can have as a teacher is to be a mentor teacher. Because you're really parlaying and delineating your expertise on them. But the overview here is that it is teacher-centered, focus on the CSTPs, and there's that one-on-one work with the mentor and the teacher candidate. And all of that is encapsulated on what we call an individual learning plan, ILP. Now, the ILP itself comes from the teacher candidate's preliminary program. So typically in the preliminary program, preliminary teaching credential program, at the end, there is an individual learning plan that's created for the teacher candidate. So when they go to the teacher induction program, they are guided to meeting certain goals. And those goals could include anything from diversifying their ability to teach certain subjects. For instance, if it's a math teacher, they've only been teaching geometry. Now we want them to learn content in Algebra 1, Algebra 2, or trigonometry, calculus, statistics. It could be content driven, or it could be certain goals that are CST based. It could be more associated with differentiated instruction, or it could be maybe student-led led instruction. We believe in cognitive coaching. So the types of questions that are asked during the mentor session are in a way kind of inquiry-based. In what ways do you believe instruction worked really well? So we avoid the yes or no questions. In what ways do you believe your English language learners were guided to learning? In what ways can you improve? In what ways did you do well? We also include a lot of resources. So after the observations and after working with the teacher candidates, we include multiple resources. This second bullet point is vital to understanding how our program is set apart from others. The job embedded and interconnected with the district needs. So within the match of the teacher candidate at their school site and the mentor, we ensure that there's that third party, which is the administrator, who represents the district. Because we want to ensure that all of the projects, which are California Standards for the Teacher Profession based, that are teacher performance expectations based, will ultimately lead into a positive result for the teacher candidate and be a strong addition to the school or school district itself. So this idea of making it job embedded makes our program significantly important, because imagine an administrator having a newer teacher there And that teacher is more of not just being a teacher, but really being a teacher leader and helping the school and even the school district out on a major project to bring in more students or to help students learn. So that's so, so vital. So with that job embeddedness, which is custom for each school site, imagine that every school will have its own district or school need. So that is what makes it customized. So it's a customized induction based on the teacher's needs, which is based on what the school needs. We definitely believe in the adult learning theory. So with that, we actually enroll our mentor teachers into a mentor collaboration course. We want to ensure that when the state looks onto our course and our program for accreditation, that we really take a look at what our mentors are using. We really take a very close look in terms of what our mentors are doing in terms of cognitive coaching. So the mentor collaboration course works with the mentors in order to ensure that that collaboration between what they're telling their mentee is documented. And in doing that, we hope that we build a strong trust and support. Because teacher education, I would say right now, with post-pandemic, has met a number of challenges in trying to maintain that teachers understand the importance of their role, to be excited about teaching again, coming back from being more isolated away from your students to being right there in the classroom with your students, and really realizing that teaching actually comes from within the soul. It's not just a trained job that it's an hourly pay that you go to and you check in and you check out. You go home with your students' hearts. You go home with your students' joys. You go home with your students' pains. So that mentor support is vital because we want to ensure that they know their role is more than just guiding them with content, more than just guiding them with the teacher performance expectations, more than just guiding them with the California standards for the teaching profession, but actually sharing with them, how does your heart feel after today? How do you feel about not just how the content was delivered? How do you believe particular students in your class reacted to that? How do you think they'll take it home? And how does that make you feel? So that trust and understanding that, and I'm sure a lot of our mentees have said, I don't know if I can do this, but making sure that they stay on course to finish up, and that, you know, we're really that cheerleader for them. Those mentors are really cheerleaders. So there is this multi-tiered support that was mentioned in regards to not just the mentee to the mentor support, but also the mentor gets support through the institution. In the 2-year program, which is 4 terms, we monitor and measure very closely the candidates' progress. We want to ensure that they meet expectations, and in many cases, they may surpass expectations. And even when meeting expectations, we do want to ensure that they are provided resources to see how to go to the next level. Even with those that are exceeding the expectations, we say, well, are there other things that you can do? Let's say if it's a single subject chemistry teacher who's just teaching general chemistry, have they thought about teaching now AP, advanced placement chemistry, or honors chemistry? So we try to stretch the students. We only have them for 2 years, so we really try to stretch them, even if they're meeting expectations or exceeding expectations. And after the end of the program, what we do within our office, the credential analyst goes through the CTC website, the California Commission on Teaching Accreditation website, and indicates that they've cleared the credential. And it's such an exciting moment to have that clear credential. So we sometimes hear from our instructors. So these are some points that are made in regards to the how and what we know from the how. We want to ensure that the students are the teacher of record within the class. And sometimes school districts have various shortages. So there might be a need to place, let's say, a multiple subject teacher in a non-elementary classroom. So in those cases, they would have to still be placed in multiple courses. So it could be science, and one course science, another course math, another course social studies, another course English language arts. But we have to ensure that they are the teacher of record of that particular course at least 50% of the time. So that would mean 50% in one and then 50% in another. We do provide just-in-time support for 1 hour a week. That's one-on-one mentee support, mentor-mentee support. And that's really vital for you to have that person that you can talk to that is not judgmental, that could guide you in terms of where you are and where you want to go. Based on your individual learning plan is so essential. And our feedback is so beautiful to hear that, you know, they continue with their mentor even after the program ends. The support within the institution is not only through the instructor, but is also through our learning management system, which is under Canvas. So within that system, there is support for the individual learning plan. The students have ample time to discuss concerns, questions, feedback, scenarios, case studies within discussion board. There is observations done by mentors for which it is uploaded and evaluated within our Canvas system. You will get an observation by a colleague. I mean, imagine peer review is so essential. Within California, as well as for this program, we do require that these students identify a focus student. This is a student in a marginalized community that it either could be by socioeconomic status, by race. It could be one from the LGBTQ community. It could be a student who is in the system, in the foster care system. So we want to ensure that our students have the ability to work with the most vulnerable population. So that's just part of our program, part of that diversity, equity, and inclusion piece. And we lead to this, to the larger school community. So the larger school community, the main objective is to create a module that will identify and develop opportunities to build strong relationships within your community. So let's think about that. So you live in a community that is, let's say it's under a particular oppression. It could have reduced access to healthcare. It could have reduced access to foods. It could be a food desert. It could be just reduced access to other types of help, such as Social Security office or other child welfare, whatever, you know, it might be. But that's something that we ask them to discuss with their administrator. So the teacher candidate, they're newer at the school. They could be there a year or two. They say, I have this big project. It's called a larger school community for which I need to do something to help my community out. So they come up with this idea. It must be approved by the principal, and it has to be something that they are leading. It cannot be something that, you know, their vulnerable population is leading. A lot of our students actually do something with parents, such as a back to school night, or a science fair, or reading, books and or other elements to improve literacy. So all very, very exciting things, and I have some to share with you. But you will create, or the students will create, SMART goals to identify an activity they're interested in and connect and collaborate with the larger school community. So I'll share my experience as a mentor. My mentees would come up with various opportunities, and I said, remember, you're leading this, great ideas, but remember, you're the one who's really taking it and leading it through. So many times it's kind of, it's not one way. It's not, they create this great idea and it's approved. Many times as they have the idea first, they check with the mentor. They say, do you think I should share this with the principal? And, we say, yeah, possibly. So with the support from the mentor and administrator, the candidates create the SMART goals. And the SMART goals are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. That last part is essential because I remember some of our students have great, gigantic goals, and it's time frame. This is a 2-year program. Are you going to be able to complete that within, this time frame? Actually, they have a little shorter than that because they're so busy, right? Teaching, being new teachers and being in school, that they really don't use it until the last year they start working on it. So do we have time to show this educator mind frame and why it matters?
Let me see. Let me reshare with sound, and then I think we can share it. There you go.
Well, thank you very much. It's kind of special today because Ed Week, as I'm sure everyone in this room knows, is one of the major avenues for people to hear about research, to hear what's happening, not only in terms of the kind of research that I do, looking at other people's work, but also the kind of research you do when you look at the evidence of what makes the difference in your classrooms and schools. It's also great to be here because it was only last week that I shifted my whole operation that I've been running for many years from Cognition in New Zealand to base it here in Corwin in the US. And so that's kind of special for me, so that's really great. And the third thing is it's a great privilege to be the warm-up act for Peter DeWitt. The story, set the scene. What I've tried to be doing over the last few years is to change the conversation around what works to what works best. To try and understand why it is that in education, everybody claims they have evidence that what they do works. And my challenge to any of you is, have you ever met a teacher who has said they're below average? Have you ever heard an academic who doesn't know the answer? And have you ever met a policymaker who just knows truth? And it just seems strange when I started this many years ago that we're in a profession where everybody knows the answer. And like you, I've been a kid. It's not true. There is variance out there. And so the argument was, could I put everything along this continuum? And yes, the visible learning work has been very much focused on achievement. And given I've got 250 million students, I kind of got a lot of achievement from classroom tests to standardized tests. And certainly the observation is that in our discipline, we don't have a history of taking kids out and putting them in a laboratory. Almost all this data is based on what happens in real schools with real kids. Yes, there are many other important outcomes of schooling. And there's a group in Germany that I'm working with that's looking at the same, asking the question about affective and motivation. We published an article last year that did the same thing but looked at how students learn. Others have looked at special needs students. And of course, there are many other outcomes of schooling. But I make no apology, achievement is one of them. And so the question is, could you put everything across this continuum? One of the criticisms is, but wait a moment, surely it would be different for 5-year-olds and 15-year-olds. Surely it's different in California and Vermont. Surely it's different with girls and boys and left-handed and right-handers. And that is a critical question that we can answer empirically. In the jargon, they're called moderators. And for the last 200 years, we've been searching for them because our whole premise of individual differences assumes that this continuum would be different. And I'm sure you've heard the argument. My kids are different. This school is different. Now, obviously, I've looked at that very closely because I started believing that was the case. I struggled to find any evidence for that. That doesn't mean to say kids don't differ. What it means to say that what works best with special needs kids, struggling kids, works best with gifted kids. What works best with 5-year-olds with 15. And the one that upsets most people, that which works best with English works best in maths and phys ed and physics and panel beating. Put that aside. I wanted to ask across the influences from the child, the family, the school, the parents, the finances, the accountability, you name it. And you can see now I keep adding. And I keep adding, which frustrates a few of my colleagues who say, why does it keep changing? Well, research keeps being added. And I was trained in my undergraduate days in philosophy of science to look for falsifiability. And I want to be the first person.
Dr. Leggett, we have 15 minutes left. Should we keep going?
Well, actually, yes, we can go because I'd like to actually go to the examples. So let's go here. So as we work to develop our skills as professional educators, remember that CSTP 6, this project, and this is what we shared with them, this project will help them take a closer look. What does it mean to be a professional? And we're really kind of putting the seed in their mind that to be a professional really is going to be being a teacher leader, to stepping out of just being within the classroom and saying, there are things that I can do that affect beyond where my students are. Okay. So within that larger school community, we do want to ensure social emotional learning. So that element is vital. Universal design, UDL, everyday arts for special education, EASE, family engagement. Consider SEL support specific to distance learning. We talked about that because of the like post-pandemic, and empowering parents as facilitators of education. So even prior to the pandemic, the idea of bringing parents into school, you know, depending on the schools, there was some pushback from the administrators because the administrators didn't necessarily want to force the parents in because in underserved communities, they worked long hours, they weren't available on the weekends. So that's why that kind of like that distance part kind of came up and became more relevant. Okay. So here's an example on the next screen about a project that was done. Participation, engagement, and self-advocacy. So this student, Natalia, who finished about 2 years ago, right, did an exciting project. She worked in a school in a very underserved community where English was not the first language. And what she found also as an English language learner, that she needed to speak up. She needed to advocate. And she said a lot of people within her culture weren't, you know, they got into school and they just were quiet. They didn't ask for anything. They were just so quiet. And she said, you know what? Our students really need to self-advocate. And so she did a survey, and then she was able to come up with a way to improve engagement. So she, I think in the next slide, she defined the terms self-advocacy, knowing when and how to speak up to make sure that your needs are being met. Some students, if you think about this, were going home hungry. So they didn't want to say anything at the school site. So how do they do that? Giving them skills and giving them a voice to do that, the students were so elated. They said, we didn't know that we had a right to self-advocate. And I think it really helped her with that. So the second project for teacher induction, Molly, I think she graduated in the same year. She connected subject matter to real life context in the local community through a survey that she did with her students' parents. So she actually went to the parents and said, what small businesses do you own? I thought that was genius. She brought the small businesses to the school. Can you imagine? So that laundry business down the street, I didn't know that that was Mr. Smith's son's, business. I didn't know that. And that store, I didn't know that. It was, I would say this one was by far the most impressive one. So what she ended up doing was really kind of creating a website. So she created a link on the school website that connected the entire school community to all of the small businesses within the community. Genius, absolutely genius. So this last slide here refers to all the needs for the larger school community. So we have the checklist that they're meeting the certain CSTPs and how well they're doing that. I know as a mentor, that was something that I reflected on. How professional were they? Was it meeting all the students' needs? Especially the self-advocacy. Oh, it just was way high on social emotional learning. Oh, goodness. And so is this, because in a way, when the parents, in the second LSC example where the school community actually came into the school, that also really boosted the students' morale, because they realized they were special, that, yeah, now everybody knows my parents own an ice cream shop or whatever it might be, or babysitting or whatever it might be. So obviously the SMART goals had to make sure, the timeliness, make sure everything strategically was met. And it just continued that this is the chart that we use. We have to make sure everything was specific. So yes, great, grandiose idea, but the hard work for the mentors and the mentee was to ensure that every box was checked, that every element was met in regards to the goals. And wow, this really set them up for success. And I do know a few of our students who left one school ultimately, and for whatever reason moved to other schools, took that same project with them and really became superstars at their next school. But I told them, I said, these projects you do for the larger school community, they can be translated into career goals for yourself. You could take these and move on to another school, and they will be so impressed with what you've done, because you not only supported your students, you really are like a staple at your school, and your principal's going to love you for the work you're doing. And so here we are with when you get the slides, or you reach out to me, you can get some of the digital resources. And I think the next slide, you can have my contact information. There it is.
Leggett, thank you so much for sharing your experiences and your wisdom with us. I'd now like to have some time. We'll be a little short on that question answer time, but would love if anyone has a question, if they want to share that question in the Q&A. We would love to spend a little time getting some more insight from you, Dr. Leggett, before we head on off to our next thing. So if you have a question, please share in the Q&A box in the webinar. I know we had someone who came really wanting to learn about critical reflection practices. Can you share a little bit more about how that's part of the process for your teachers in the program?
Oh my goodness, that is so close to my heart. We require as the mentors, not only that 1 hour of one-on-one support, they have to also reflect each week. So what I did with my mentors is I created a sheet that said what went well this week. What do you feel didn't go as well as you would have liked to go? What additional support do you feel that you could have used? And what questions do you have? Each and every week, students have to submit that. It's a written document to their mentor. And what I've suggested, because only the mentor keeps this, is really about that one-on-one process of them really getting to know their mentee and answering any questions that they have. And I say 50 words is fine. It's not an essay. It's really about what's happening. And I recommend that they keep it on a Google document, because I said, once you finish this program, once you get your clear credential, once you go out into the world and you get that tenure as a teacher, you want to be able to reflect each and every week in those same questions. What really went well with you this week? What do you feel was unexpected? Sometimes I use that word. What was unexpected? Sometimes I get a parent came into the classroom unannounced and they were upset with me. Yes, that is unexpected. Don't be self-advocate. That happened. Don't feel that it's a negative against you when something odd happens. Was real. That is a reflection. That is really what happened that week. And how do you think you could have handled it differently? Or it could have been something as simple as, and I'll just share my own personal reflection, that although I was a science teacher, I was a chemistry teacher. I wasn't a biology teacher. And next door, the biology teacher's white mice got away. And so I will say that I am a little bit afraid of mice. And so I was teaching and a white mouse came into my room. So that was unexpected of me, if I could reflect on anything. And so the way I reacted was I did scream because I was very frightened. And I do realize that probably wasn't the most professional way to handle it. But then when I looked in the hallway, I saw all the mice running. I said, oh, so that's what happened. So any type of something happened unexpectedly. In addition to that, unannounced fire drill, that happens. It's perfectly okay to write that out. It's perfectly okay. And this, I remember one reflection was a student who was in a self-contained classroom, special ed students. And of course, there's a lot of teacher aides that are in there, right? And so unexpected fire drill. Of course, the students, got up, a lot of discord. So, as a mentor, I could share practice how to react when there is a fire drill, because the more practice, and even for those who aren't special needs, a lot, when you do practice, then, you can get a little better at it. But there will be things, when a parent comes to the classroom, there will be things that you will not expect. So just practice that. I mean, you give them an opportunity to self-advocate. Look, I need skills to work with parents that walk into my classroom. Or you give them skills to say, or you give them opportunity to say, hey, I need skills to know when there's a fire drill. Yeah, well, you can ask the principal, you can ask the administrative assistants, you can ask about that, but there may be times in which, you don't know.
Thank you for sharing that wisdom and the real experiences of teachers and how they can use that reflection to then advocate. Thanks for making that connection for us. And thank you for being here today and sharing what y'all are doing and how we can consider doing that in our own practice. We just appreciate you sharing your expertise with us. I'm now going to close us out, but we just again want to say thank you for your time. During this series, if you see any of the principles in action, we would love for you to use the Branch Ed Framework hashtag, as well as the 6 Principles hashtag, to share it with us on social media. We can't wait to see how you're applying the framework in your own context. Our next webinar is on April 5th at 12 to 1 Central, 1 to 2 Eastern. It's Ready Day 1, the intersection of content, pedagogy, and the learner. You can register for it using the QR code on the screen or using the link in the chat. Lastly, if you would like to read more about our principles in action, please visit our resource portal where you can read more about each of the principal briefs. You can find the link in the chat. We also would love to hear about your experiences today. If you could take the brief poll on your screen, we would love to hear about your experience at the webinar today. Thank you so much for all of those who are coming to listen. And thank you, Dr. Leggett, for sharing all of your expertise and your wisdom. And we just can't wait to do these things in our own practice and think of the ways we can apply this. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great Wednesday. We'll see you on April 5th for our next webinar. Have a great afternoon. Bye.